with another Beat the Bookie podcast, episode 5, The Psychology of Losing. And I'm here with my friend John Alesia, a.k.a. Statsational. How are you, my friend?
Doing okay, man. We're hanging in there.
Good.
Tough weekend.
It's always a tough weekend when you talk about sports wagering. When you win, when you don't win. And you know what? That is exactly why we came up with the premise of the podcast of how to handle streaks that don't always go your way. I am at Season Long Says, at Alan Sislowski on Twitter. Another great episode here planned for you that are watching live, for you watching on the audio cast. All the different aspects of this podcast it covers all the different aspects of sports wagering. From just some basic terminology to also to we don't give out picks, but we teach you strategy. And if you join Beat the Bookie join Beat the Bookie from DFS Army, you'll get more and more of this content. But what we're going to do here today is talk about what happens when your system is not going correct. What happens to you when you lose a few wagers in a row?
Yeah, well, psychology is it's almost as important, if not more important in some aspects. Let me mind if I start out with the story of back when I first started betting, and then yeah.
Do you actually? Your stories are some of the most requested thing on the last couple episodes where we didn't have a story. We got a little blowback. We said I thought John was going to be telling anecdotal stories on, but yeah. For those of you who are listening for the first time, John Alesia is a professional sports wager and not a former, but still a professional. Were you a professional poker player as well, or did you? I know
played.
You were
yeah, I mean, I played a lot of poker. I don't know. I never officially was making. I was never making my money solely in poker. So at the time, I was still working on Wall Street. So I guess now, technically, when I play, it is professionally, since I am playing for a living now and not working for anyone else.
But those of you, again, who are from DFS Army or Beat the Bookie, you know the expertise of John. But he is also a great coach and a great storyteller. So, John, start with, as we get into how you break cold streaks, start with your story that you were telling me offline. Go ahead.
So, yeah, I mean, when I first started betting, I probably came into it similar to maybe a lot of people listening to this podcast. I was just out of college. You know, I love it was the fall time. So you had NFL season, you had college football season. I was heavily watching all of these games, whether it be like I said, the college or the NFL. Figured, hey, I know so much about this stuff. I watch nothing but sports on TV. I could do this. I could beat these bookies, right? So, and the cool thing back then was, it was much cooler than betting now. Like now you bet, you go online, you just click a couple of buttons. There's no human interaction. Back then you actually had a human bookie. Like you had to get on the phone, you had to call this guy. There was no internet. And I was actually dealing with a pretty big operation in Manhattan, and you'd call and you'd have like a code name. And I remember,
wait, what was your code name?
So, well, I was just John. So the code name was my other guy. So I'd be John for the Fox. The Fox was my guy was my connection at this big book making operation. So you'd have there was 5 different guys who would answer the phone, and they were all characters, and it was actually fun, So it'd be like, hey, John for the Fox. And those were when you'd bet 5 times, 10 times. At times, I don't know if you remember this, Alan.
Of course, yeah. 5 times it meant $25, right?
Right, that's right. So whatever it was, you multiplied by 5. So you'd be like, right. So you'd always say, yeah, exactly. I'm a 10-time bettor. I'm a 20-time bettor, something like that. Now that was things that we call unit size. I didn't know what a unit size was back then, but typically you'd be like, yeah, I'm a 10-timer, 20-timer. I still have buddies who'll text me. They're like, hey, you mind putting a 20-time bet in for me? Things like that.
They come from the old
exactly.
School when you hear that.
Exactly. So
kind of refreshing.
It is in a way. But yeah, I'm just, I'm a typical guy betting, and it was probably like a Monday or Tuesday night. NBA was in December now. So NBA's going. And I said, well, what am I going to do? I'm sitting home. I'm going to bet the NBA game. I got the Nets local team. I'm in Brooklyn. I'm going to play like a Nets Miami game. So I'm going to put 10 times $50 on the Nets. I'll keep it short. The Nets, I took Miami plus the points. Game goes to 3 overtimes. I'm basically winning plus the points at the end of regulation, at the end of overtime 1, at the end of overtime 2. And of course, I get beat in the third overtime with like a late 3. I think like Armin Gillian hits like a
Armin Gillian. I remember.
Yeah, like Arm and Hammer.
Yeah, he had the slanted
Oh,
haircut.
yes, he did. He looked like Big Daddy Kane with that.
Yeah, he
with
did.
So I think he hits a 3, and I'm like getting like 3.5. It was like a 1-point game. He hits a 3 to make it 4, and like boom, I lose. So it's like $50. But again, this kind of ties into what we're talking about. It wasn't the $50. I was betting 50 and $100 every game, but now it's like being pissed off and tilting because damn, I should have won that game, and I was only betting it out of the fact that it was on TV and I'm going to watch it. So whatever, I'm going to get that back tomorrow night, and of course tomorrow night is a loser. So on and so forth. We get to Friday night, and I'm down like 200. What am I down? Like, I'm sorry. By the time Friday night rolls around, I'm down. Let's call it $300. And now I'm going to play. Since I haven't been doing really well with the NBA, I'm going to make the bright decision to flip over to the NHL, which I know very little about. And I'm just going to play. I'm like, if I just play, I'm going to spread out my risk. I'm going to play 3 favorites. And surely, it's the NHL. They just have to win the game. They're favorites. They're going to win. So I take like 3 of them for like, I don't know, $150, $200 a piece or something like that. Now I'm already increasing my bets come Friday night. All 3 teams lose. I'm out at the bar watching this now with my buddies, and I'm now in the hole. So let's say, I remember at this point, we're going into Saturday, and I'm definitely down like over $1,000. I started out with a $50 bet, right? And this is just the poor money management. I started with a $50 bet. I work my way because I'm increasing my bets. I work my way into Saturday, now down 1,000, which I don't want to lose $1,000. Like I had it sort of, but I just graduated college. Like I could pay it, but I didn't really want to pay it, which was the whole reason I was chasing. I don't want to pay $200 either. And this is what happens. You get in this psychology that I'm just going to chase it. I'll win. I'll increase my bets a little bit. I'll get it back. I'm bound to win a game. I'm due. So we're at the bar, and now this is when the NFL kicks into 2 games on a Saturday. And the first game is the Giants are playing Washington that next day at 12:30. Well, I don't know how you were when you were 21, 22 years old, but when I went out till 3 o'clock in the morning, getting up for 12:30 was not the easiest thing in the world to do.
12:30 the next day wouldn't have been easy.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So now I've got a few on me. We're doing shots. My buddies are all Giant fans, and I just love the Giants in this game. So I said, that's it. Giants are home. I go, I'm putting it all on the Giants. I'm getting out of the hole. I'm taking the Giants. Now we're all in a good mood. Yes, go do it, Giants. So of course I wake up like 5 minutes after the kickoff. I call up, they're like, oh no, the game locked. It's closed. They kicked off. I'm like, ah, shit. Giants win by like 30 points, of course. Right. So now I'm really tilted. My buddy,
also familiar, I have to say.
My buddy's uncle is a bookmaker, and he's living down in Aruba at the time. So he's working at an offshore book. So he used to give me games that the sharp players were playing. He's like, hey, yeah, the sharp guys like such and such. So this was Uncle Dino. So I go to my buddy. I said, listen, we got to call Dino down in Aruba, find out if he's got anything sharp here in the afternoon. There's college basketball. Give me something. I got to get out of this hole. So I call him up. He says, yeah, they really like Kentucky. The Sharps love Kentucky today in college hoops. All right. I'm like, okay, you know what? I'll put like 500 on Kentucky. Needless to say, they were laying like 17 points, I think, against Villanova. They were never covering the 17 ever. They were never up by 17.
It was the losing side from the beginning.
From the beginning, they were never up 17 points. So now I'm down that. So now I've got the 4 o'clock game, and mind you, this is all going on while the Giants are just keep extending their lead, and I'm like, So I have the 4 o'clock game.
Twisting that knife.
Patriots, Pittsburgh, 4 o'clock. Drew Bledsoe against Cordell Stewart. This is like 1996 or something like that, 97. And I call him up. I said, who's Sharps like? He goes, they're not playing it. Sharps don't like the game. He said, but every sucker is betting Pittsburgh. I said, all right, that's it. I'm going against the suckers. So I call up. I have to get, mind you, this started with a $50 bet like 5 days prior. I'm now betting like $1,000 or $1,500. I had to get my limit upped from my guy.
Oh my God.
Just to get out of this hole. So I said, beautiful. We're getting out of it. I'm taking the Patriots. The suckers like Pittsburgh. I'm going with the Patriots. Patriots were laying like 2.5 points, something like that. They're up 8 points with about 2 minutes to go, and they're facing like a 3rd down and 4. So I'm begging them that they throw the ball. First down ends the game. And I said, throw the ball, but please throw it over the middle. So if you do throw a pick, at least they still have to drive the about half the field to come and tie this game. Plus, then I needed 2 to go overtime. So needless to say, he throws one towards the sideline. It gets picked. It gets run back. They get it to like inside the 5. I'm like, all right, they still have to score. They score. They make the 2. We go to overtime. I'm like, all right, we can still win this in overtime.
Isn't it amazing? You become like a master mathematician.
When every scenario.
Yeah.
You know every scenario when you bet. So anyway, we get to that point, and now they go to overtime. Pittsburgh gets the ball first, and I don't know if it was the first play or second play, but they hit a bomb. They get it into field goal range. This is back when you could kick the field goal and win the game. Field goal, game over. And now I'm like, that's it. I'm done. Like, I couldn't even bet the Sunday games because I just had no more money. Like, I was just getting my first bonus at work, and that basically went all to the bookie. And again, this all started because it was just a recreational. Let's have some fun. I'm home on a Tuesday, Monday night, whatever it is. I'm going to play this Nets game because it's on TV. So I learned a lot of, and there's a lot of lessons to be learned from that story. And it's a story that everyone has. Like, if you've done this long enough, we've all been in that situation to varying degrees of money lost, or we know someone who has. But part of it is what I always talk about is it's almost like being a quarterback, right? So the quarterback has to prep all week long. And then the quarterback preps all week long so that when they get into the game, whatever they're seeing, they've seen before, and then they could just react. Well, the same thing in any sort of business, or certainly in sports betting, is you want to have that preparation done ahead of time. Get all the moving parts limited to as few as you possibly can, and where to the point where you're just handicapping games. But your money management, how are you going to bet, all that should be all figured out ahead of time. That wasn't for me back then, and it's really not for most people. So that's why I always stress.
Definitely for most people.
No.
Most people, like you said, do exactly what you said. And then the psychology is you even start figuring out, like, oh my God, I just worked a week to pay this bookie. And you start going to those crazy scenarios too. So
that's the other thing you get into. There's 2 things. When you win, you start thinking about not even the money. It's like, I could buy
you spend the money.
Right. I could buy a suit. I could buy a watch. I could buy a laptop. I could buy a car. Like, depending on, this has happened to me in DFS. Like, the first time I won 6 figures in DFS, you're like, I'm taking everybody out and I'm buying it. But no one realizes that you lose 5 figures quite often to win that 6 figure, and you hope at the end of the year it kind of nets out to a positive number, but it's hard to do. And this is part of like I said, the psychology of it. But to go back to that story, I always stress bankroll and money management and your unit sizes and being appropriate with your unit sizes. And the reason it's twofold. One, yes, it's from the very obvious standpoint of you want to make sure that we're mitigating our risks from the actual financial standpoint. We don't want to just go blowing. We don't want to blow the rent. We don't want to blow the mortgage. We want to make sure we can pay our bills. Should be for fun for most people. And we want to make sure that money is set aside as such. But an even more important aspect of this is the psychological aspect. So I'm coming off a weekend. It was a bad weekend, not the worst weekend I've ever had. I've had worse. I will have many worse weekends in the NFL. It's just the way it goes when you're sports betting.
See, that's what I was telling somebody, that I was telling about your record, and how a professional, someone who's really good at this, probably hits 58% of their picks. I'm talking about like they're in the elite level, and 60% of your picks. I mean, you're God. You're God. And I said, even when an expert or someone with a great record, just say they're hitting 38% of their bets or 25% of their bets, that's usually coming off a 75% streak too. So it's like we have to look at a larger sample size in order to see where you're at. But I interrupted. You were talking about you personally were coming off a short cold streak. So what does that do to you? Because not only are you risking your own money, there's people that are depending on you for process.
That's exactly right. So for me, I've come a long way in my own personal development. Let me say it. So if you ever watch the show Billions, if anyone's ever seen it, and they have a therapist basically in the office, right? One of the main characters, and she works at the hedge fund as a psychologist to work with the traders. We actually had somebody in our office towards the tail end here of the last job I was working at, who was also formerly a trader, and was a client of ours at one point. But it's good to have that person to talk to. But way before that, I used to go see a therapist on my own because it's really helpful just in life, but I think it was really helpful in this business where he was able to get across to me that you're taking everything way too personally. In other words, he goes, you didn't win, like your model won, and you didn't lose, your model won. And I argue with him. I'm like, yeah, but I'm the one who built the model.
Right.
And he's like, that's true. But at the end of the day, you did all the work. You know what you have proven it to be successful over a period of time. You can't hold on to every win and loss. Can't be, can't change your mentality. You can't get overly excited. And it took years and years and years to be able to figure that out and get to that point where it doesn't nearly affect me as it used to. But I go back to I think the reason being is when your finances and your bankroll are in order. That let me put it this way. So I try to get myself in. I try to trick myself mentally in a lot of ways. And if you look at successful people, I had a professor once said, he was talking about people who were some of the I forget the exact percentage, but it was a huge percentage of self-made millionaires had hit some sort of extreme rock bottom in their life. Whether it was right before they achieved their success. So whether it was they were kicked out of school, they were, something bad happened, they got a divorce, some sort of financial crisis in their life, something happened where they hit a rock bottom, and then they were able to push themselves up the forward.
It's like that book. It was called I Got Fired, and it's the best thing that ever happened to me.
It's true, right? Because what happens is we get complacent in our lives. It's real easy, especially if you live a middle-class life in the United States, it's real easy to get complacent. So, and now, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with going to college, getting a decent job, getting married, having kids, and having that life that, the overwhelming majority of people go ahead and pursue. The traditional path, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But it's really hard to get out of that if that's what you wanted. And I'm not saying that's what everyone needs to do, because not everyone's programmed to do that. But it's very hard to get out of that mentality. I don't want to go bankrupt in order to become successful. Like, that's not the goal. But the goal is to try to put yourself in the mindset of how does it feel? Like, why does it? When you ever hear someone, they talk about an actor in Hollywood and they go, man, that guy was living in his car.
Right.
And what a huge success story. That guy was living in his car, and the Stallone or something like that, where the guy was homeless and then he became a huge star. I said, well, granted, it's hard. It's hard to start from nothing, but when you take a field like acting or something like that, it's real hard to be a guy who comes from a family who's an upper middle class family, doesn't have any real connections to Hollywood, and say, okay, well, I could go get this job for $75,000, $100,000 a year, or I could risk it all and go out to Hollywood and try to pursue that dream. Like, it's a real difficult thing to do, and the average person won't do it. It's much easier when you're like, well, I got nothing else to lose. Right. So,
right, they always say, like, having like, everyone's like, oh, have a plan B. But, some really great entrepreneurs always tell you, if you have a plan B, plan A is destined to fail. Like, when you just said it exactly correct. Like, when you have nothing to fall back on, you have no choice to succeed. And the other point I was going to make on something you said was that struck me was, I think in life, as in where you're going with this, is that we trade security for freedom in all aspects of our life, financially, in relationships, in sports betting, and and all that. So the more security we have, the less freedoms we have, and freedom, that's not necessarily a bad thing. There's a healthy point on the graph where we feel comfortable in life. So I think that's really interesting that you point that out. It is.
Well, it's an evolutionary biology thing. Right. Because think about over the course of time and our evolution, accumulating resources and holding on to them meant survival. Right. So it's triggered in our DNA. It's built in there to not want to lose. Like, it's very hard for people to wake up today with less money than they had yesterday. And we see this where and I've spoken about this in the book Scorecasting, and mentioned had some really good anecdotal evidence of this. But we value losing, or we take losing harder than we ever take winning. You'll hear NFL coaches all the time, guys who retired. Well, why'd you retire? They say, I just couldn't take the losses anymore. Like the losses just sat with me for a long period of time, and the winning just goes away. Like you'll see these great college basketball coaches or any coach, and they'll win a championship, and then the next day they're in the office and they're out there recruiting, or they're out there looking at film, and they're it's just because they need to keep winning because the losing hurts you so much. But my point of all that is you've got to train yourself without living in your car to have that feeling of living in your car. It's a very difficult thing to do. And again, like you said, not necessarily something everyone needs to do. But just to bring it back to the sports betting world, if you are properly managing your money, if you properly are taking your unit sizes and you're not increasing it, if you lose 3-4 games in a row, your mentality then does not become, I need to risk 4 times what I did on that first bet in order to get it back, because you just say, you understand the pattern, you understand statistics. Another part of that is I've won, let's say about 1,300 over the last 1,300 NFL games that I played, somewhere around 56% of those games. Now, again, you were just talking about how 60% is just, it's godlike.
You're a god.
Right. So we look at numbers. The average person looks at statistics. We all do it. And it's all relative to what exactly we're looking at, right? So if we talked about picking, let's say we said, if I'm going to place a bet here, I've got a 99% chance to win this bet. Like, you'd be looking to go to the bank. I could guarantee you, we're going to do it. It's going to be a bag of marbles. There's going to be one white one. There's going to be 99 black ones in there. And I'm going to tell you, listen, all you've got to do is not pick the white one, and I'll pay you even money on that bet.
We call that the airplane test.
That's exactly right. Like, would you get on, and that's where I was going with it. Like, would you get on the plane though and do the same experiment? So it's all relative. If I told you, 1 out of these next 100 planes is going to go down, you wouldn't do it.
Right. People think a 99% chance is a lock. It's not, because what you just said, would you get on an airplane that had if there was 100 airplanes, would you get on one of them that you knew was going to crash, or that you didn't know, one of these 100 airplanes? And imagine, if airplanes crashed at a 1% rate, they'd be falling out of the sky like they were bombs. I think I looked it up one time. It's like 0.00001% of airplanes, crash. It's
you're much risk. You're at a much greater risk as soon as you get in your car the next time and go to the supermarket than you are getting on a plane. But we don't get nervous when we get in our car, but we do when we get on a plane.
The only 1% airplane you get on, you probably get on like a 20% crash airplane is Chris Liss of RotoWire always says, if you were an Argo, and you had to get out of, or in Vietnam trying to hold on to the helicopter as it's leaving, you'd get on a 20% to crash.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Because you know what the alternatives are. So, but I said, so understanding statistics and understanding, I think I may have spoken about this. And again, the reason why I stress money management so much is we're just dealing. I look at these games as statistics. Like, I understand that, like last night's game, I had the Rams last night, plus never in the game. Now, I understand as a fan watching the game, Baltimore has just looked far better than the Rams have. But I stick to the model. And when you do that, and when you become, my model is often very contrarian. It's got games that people just don't like. Now, when they win, hey, it's great. But when they lose, here's the problem. When they lose, everyone else was on the other side. So you hear about it, and the people who, and then I'll question myself, like, that game was so easy, right. and you'll say, boy, it was so easy. Everyone liked it. It was so easy. Why didn't I just take the game that was so easy? And you have to get yourself out of that mentality. If it was so easy, then 95% of the public would be making money on these games, and they're not. They're losing.
Yeah, no, but just for context, this podcast is being recorded on, the week of Thanksgiving of 2019. We try to make them evergreen, but what John's referring to is last night the Baltimore Ravens were a 3.5-point underdog in Los Angeles playing the Rams, and his model spit out to take the Rams, which is reasonable. He sticks to he plays the number, not the game. But anecdotally, especially in hindsight, you could say, hey, look, Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens have been on fire. They've looked the part. Any guy can come off the street and say, hey, I want that team's the one that's going to win. But that's not what sports wagering is.
No, I know a lot of just to correct you, the Ravens were actually favored by 3.5, so you're getting 3.5 points with the Rams.
Right.
But a lot of sharp people had the Rams, and what happens is, and I see this all the time. I mean, I've gotten when I first, especially with social media, when I first started getting involved in social media, I think we've all figured this out now, but I didn't understand it then when the early days of Twitter and everything is that, you're going to hear, you're always going to, the voices are always louder on the negative side than they ever are on the positive side. This happens with everything. Like, I mean, if you own a business, you own a restaurant, you don't hear about the people who love the meal. You hear about the people who couldn't, something was wrong. They had the hair in their suit. Right. So you're always going to hear the negatives. You're not going to hear as much of the positives. So it took me a long time because I said, in real life, people are always really nice. Like you don't really run into people who are mean and nasty all that often. And then the online world, you've got to deal with, everyone's got their opinion. Everyone's going to be a little bit, not everyone. There's just going to be those bad seeds out there, or people who want to see you go down because they're smarter than you.
Yeah, sports betting Twitter is ruthless. Yeah.
So I've pretty much been able to tune that out over the years, and again, you do it long enough, you understand. But understand this, like going with the crowd, and I'm not saying you have to bet every contrarian bet. But typically my models are going to spit out contrarian stuff, and it's going to be the same way with the guys, with the other coaches. They're going to be. There was a boss of mine on Wall Street, trader, and he had told me, this was referring to trading, not gambling, but he said, the toughest trades you'll ever make are generally going to be the best. In other words, those ones that you just don't want to click that button, you don't want to pull the trigger. A lot of times, those are your best trades. And I say the same thing with sport
too, by the way. That's true for fantasy football. 100%. And I know, the ones that you're not sure of are the good trades.
It's like you just don't want to pull that trigger.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever data you have says pull the trigger, but your heart and your is like, I can't really be doing this. But the numbers point towards, yes, you have to do that, and it doesn't work out. So we teach ourselves, I'm not a psychologist, and I'm not a evolutionary biologist, but we teach ourselves to stay away from the bad things. And when things look so obviously bad and then we jump on it anyway, we don't want to make that same mistake again. It's what makes all this very difficult. It makes DFS really difficult. It makes in the DFS world, it's what makes you continue to jump on, let's say, bad. You're going to keep changing your style every week because you're going to try to chase what won last week. Wide receivers, paying up at wide receiver 1 last week, and now now you're going to try to pay up at wide receiver this week when you didn't do it last week, and you're constantly chasing your tail there. There's an old saying in horse betting that if you didn't show up for the wedding, so you're back there. But yeah, there's an old saying in horse racing where if you didn't show up to the wedding, don't come to the funeral. And that's just one of those things where it's like, don't keep chasing. We do this in sports where everything is very obvious in hindsight. So we go back.
Right. When you have the answer.
We got the answers. Like, I know exactly what lineup will win the $1 million last week. And then we try to replicate that this week. Like, what happened last week? And then you say, well, I paid up at wide, the winner, he used real expensive wide receivers. He used real cheap running backs, and he went cheap with and then he won the $1 million. And then you do that this week, and you're constantly playing a game where you're going back a week, looking at what won and doing it. And you do that. We do that in all sorts of sports.
Yeah. Recency bias is so strong, and it's hard. So, what I've seen people do, like with the football lines, for example, is they try to guess the lines 2 weeks in advance. So this way, the recency bias does it, or before if you're trying to guess the lines for week 12, you do it right after week 10's over. This way, you don't see week 11 yet, and then go back and rejigger those lines based on whatever factors.
And you could go. There's actually you could go back before the season starts. They actually have a line on every single game for the entire season. So I do like to go back. I like to save that and then go back and look, and barring obviously injuries and things like that. And then teams are obviously going to perform differently than we expected them to perform at the start of the year. but you can get a fair idea. Is this really is this a 7-point difference from, just picking a random game? Like 10 weeks ago, we saw this game at 3. Now it's 10. Like, have they really moved that much? So it's always good. I do like to go back and look at that. And like you're saying, look, Baltimore might win and cover every single game. We're talking about this, like you said, Thanksgiving week in 2019. Baltimore might win and cover every game from here through the Super Bowl. I don't know. But I can tell you this, they're going to be overvalued. The books are going to add points to their line. Now, they
Definitely
may cover those. That's right.
Definitely next week. Without seeing anything, that they're playing San Francisco next week. So San Francisco had a high profile win too. So maybe it'll be balanced out a little bit.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to look at. But you're going to see, and certainly if they roll San Francisco, I think they get Buffalo in a couple of weeks. And it doesn't mean that they're not going to cover. Now, you're going to find out what you're going to see is, and I'm picking on Baltimore right now, and I don't know if this is going to be true, but typically this is how it happens. You're going to see sharp bettors against it, and they might lose 7. They might lose the next 7 Baltimore games betting against Baltimore. I've seen it more on the flip side, where you have a bad team. If you take, again, this is the 2019 season. If you take Miami early in the season, any Miami bet I made, people question, like, how can you bet a team that doesn't want to win? I said, well, understand this. Vegas knows as much information as you do and more. That line is set at a place it's set at for a reason. Okay. They stand to lose just like you stand to lose. They know that the public's going to be on one side of this game and not the other. They're not in the business of losing money. They're setting a line based on where they think the money's going to be coming in. And listen, sometimes the public is right and people love it. Like, people think they're smart. And when they take the obvious game, it used to be taking, typically it was always taking the best quarterback. And
right.
You say, against a bad team.
Plus, nobody wants to bet against the better team. You always want the better team psychologically. You're like, hey, Baltimore, they're way better than this team. Of course I'm going to take them. But wait, the line balances that out.
Yeah, and when you're in a situation too where, like last night's game, I don't remember what the final score, 46-3 or wherever the final score was, or 6. People almost feel better if they are in it. Like in my world, that game was over in the first quarter for me, and I was just like, okay, that's a loss. But people want to feel like they were in it, as if
they want that sweat.
If I came close, then I might not have been wrong there. I mean, if the ball just bounced the right way for me, that's just not what this game is. Like, when you look at your macro picture and the overall record, you were going to win some games that were blowouts. You're going to lose some games that were blowouts. You're going to get lucky in some of these games that you shouldn't have won, and you're going to get unlucky in some of these games that you should have won. We had a couple of those this weekend, but they all balance out. I don't get too worked up over missed field goals or bad coaching decisions or whatever the case is, because I know those are going to go with me sometimes. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to lose. Think about this. If you're a sharp player, you're a smart player, and you win more often than you lose, you're going to take more bad beats than the average player. Think about it in terms of poker. If I'm the greatest poker player of all time and I always get the money in with the best hand, well, then I can only lose on bad beats, which is going to happen. And
right, that makes sense.
If I'm getting it in, that's right. If I'm a terrible player and I'm constantly getting my money in there as the dog, well, the only time I'm going to win is when I get lucky. So I don't get the bad beats because I put my money in as a 2-to-1 dog, and now I've got to suck out against my opponent. Where if I'm constantly getting my money in good, you've got to understand that comes with a lot of bad beats. So there's so many different tricks that you have to play with your mind to understand. But a lot of it comes with, you need to be confident. You need to be confident in what you're doing and your abilities, your models. If you are going down that route, you need to be confident in that. You need to have your bankroll. Just to sort of summarize it, have the bankroll, have your unit sizes, have that all set where I don't care if I lose 5 games, 6 games, 7, 8 games in a row. You should be able to sustain any sort of bad streak. That's the whole point of having a bankroll set aside, having your unit sizes be somewhere between 1%, 2%, 3%, depending on your bankroll. If it's a really, really small, if it's $100 bankroll, maybe you want to lift that to 5%. But if you have $1,000 or more in your bankroll, limit it to somewhere between 1% and 3% of your unit sizes. And I go into a lot of detail on that. Actually, we have a course that's going to be coming out that I just finished at Beat the Bookie. So with a lot of these basics. So we'll talk about.
And also, I urge people to go back and check out some of our podcasts that we did on unit size. And I want you to pick that up in a second, but we're going to take a short break right here to talk about our friends from overlaydfs.com, the start sit game where you can win the progressive jackpots. If you're tired of having to pick the perfect player at every position in order to win on salary cap DFS, if you're tired of having your salary cap DFS lineup out of the money in the first 5 minutes, does salary cap DFS feel like a job and not a game? If you want a fantasy game where the pros with 150 lineups can't dominate, then overlaydfs.com has a new revolutionary start sit game for fantasy sports. Here's how you play. You make 12 simple start-sit decisions from over 30 matchups that they present. A win, loss, or a tie will be awarded to your overall record for each decision. Records in the top 10% will win 9 times your buy-in. A 12-0 record will win the progressive jackpot. All matchups are player versus player who will have more total fantasy points. John, they also have that game where it's best record wins. I know you've been playing that game, and now they just opened up their NBA. Talk a little bit about your experience on overlaydfs.com, and I'm going to pull up the screen and see if we could pick a couple NBA games from tonight on their website.
I've loved it for many reasons. One, obviously, is because I've been winning with it. Last week, or not, the 2 weeks ago was the first losing week I had, and then I got back on the winning side last week, so it was a lot of fun. And a couple of things I like is you could play this a little earlier than you would, some of these other DFS sites, because if someone doesn't play that game, you have alternate picks that you can make, right? So if you pick a player, either the player that you pick or the player that you're playing against, and they don't play, it doesn't hurt you any because you've got your alternates. So if this is something, a lot of people don't have the time to sit in front of the computer like these DFS guys do, especially for NBA, and you have to be in front of your computer from 6:30, really from 6 o'clock on, and making sure we're not missing any of these injuries or anything like that. You could do this ahead of time and be able to get get your player matchups in there. And I think the sweats are kind of cool because a lot of times they're in the same game. Sometimes they're the same team. And I look at it. I've been doing it for the NFL. I haven't dabbled in the NBA, which I'm going to do tonight. I've been doing the NFL, and then at 4 o'clock I kind of pop in there and I go, okay, what am I going to need here in these afternoon games to win? So it's a lot of fun. I think you've got a better chance here at hitting these progressive jackpots than you do at some of these large GPPs that you'll find on these other sites. And it's a pretty nice sum of money. I didn't see if anyone won the NFL this weekend. I didn't notice it. So that progressive is going to be a little bit higher next week. So
for those of you watching on the video cast, what we did right now is we pulled up the game. Here is the NBA slate for tonight, for example. And I just clicked on join. You see right here, they have Nikola Jokic versus Bradley Beal, and you have to pick who's going to get more fantasy points. What you do is you simply click on, John, who's going to win that matchup?
That's an easy one. All right, so Jokic is the guy that you want here.
Okay, so I'd click on Jokic, as you see there, and it goes into this right side of the screen. We'll do two more. Here, I'll move down. Paul Millsap versus Davis Bertans.
I'm going to go with Millsap. I like that one a lot as well.
Okay, clicking on that one, and it moves over. And then I'll give you another good one. Kawhi versus Paul George on the same team sweat. That's pretty cool, too.
That is. You got to go with Kawhi. It's close. That's
I like Paul George
there. It's tight.
Because I feel like Kawhi could take, can defer to Paul George in this part of the season, that he doesn't have to do as much. Whereas Paul George is still trying to work his way back into full rhythm, and he'll be getting most of the work. I mean, that can go either way, but how do you? It's so cool to be able to pick between two stars. That's what I like best about it. So go to our friends over at overlaydfs.com, check out their game. They have multi-sport games, and they just opened up basketball, which is my favorite way to play DFS, because literally with every assist, with every rebound, with every block, the whole standings flip upside down. It's a really cool game. All right, John, back to what we were talking about here, which is the psychology of losing. And, I urge people to go back and talk and look at our other podcasts from Beat the Bookie on bankroll, on in-game wagering. And what John talked about here today about sticking to your system. And if you don't have a system, it's a great way to it's a good reason to join us over at Beat the Bookie. What you do is you go to DFS Army, and in the upper right-hand corner, I'm going to pull up a little screenshot. You just click on the Beat the Bookie tab, and you join us over there. And if you use the code BTB, Beat the Bookie, BTB, you can get 20% off for life. And that will give you access to John, his other coaches, all of John's sheets, his daily picks. And again, the purpose of it is not to just give you, not to give a man a fish. It's to teach a man a fish. And he will give you his system. And again, anyone who just says, hey, I have the locks, I have the picks, that's BS. No one, if they did that, they wouldn't be selling the picks. They'd be using the picks themselves. What John does is he teaches you his system on how to become a better, on how to go through a process, how to eliminate trap games. And he teaches that process to you. Did I correctly articulate it, John?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summation of kind of what's going on over there. And like I was saying earlier, I just finished doing a little online course, and we'll be getting that out. We got to just kind of make it look all pretty, but the content's on there, and that'll be coming out to the Beat the Bookie folks, and we'll have more advanced stuff. This is more of like a beginner's course on what it takes to get yourself a good foundation into sports betting, and then we're gonna get some of the other coaches involved on some more advanced techniques, some a variety of different things that either you've thought about or perhaps some stuff that you haven't thought about. There's so many ways out there. It's not only about how much money you can make and win. All we think about is wins. And if you just win, you're going to make money. And that's not necessarily true, right? Because as we pointed, I could win 10 games and lose one and lose money. As we talked about on a previous podcast, go back to the previous podcast when I told you the story about the games that were fixed. We were getting fixed games. We won a bunch of money and we lost one and wound up losing money on the whole thing because,
to be clear, his fixed games was 25, 30 years ago. It wasn't anything.
Yeah, no. And it wasn't anything I was involved in, but it was just some third hand information that I had to put two and two together and realize these games were being fixed.
Yeah. But somebody tunes into this podcast right at that second and then sends it to the FBI.
No.
All of a sudden there's a knock on your door, John,
The people who were involved have already served their time. But yeah, it's just one of those things where you can win a bunch, but if you don't have if you're not properly using proper unit sizes and money management and risk management, you can win a whole bunch and still lose money. I know a lot of people. I've got buddies of mine who they're what you typically call the degenerate gamblers. I could give them a million winners. They'll always come out a loser because they don't bet properly. They don't understand it. They're always pushing when they shouldn't be pushing, and they're playing these huge parlays instead of just playing the games. And they're just action junkies.
Yeah. And
we're giving you enough games. There's enough games in every single sport where you've got to, sometimes less is more. 2 weeks ago, I had 3 games. That was it. This week I had 8 or 9, whatever it was. It's just going to be dependent on the game. It's like we're going to be talking to a horse racing guy, I believe, at some point in the future.
Yeah, I mean, he's ready to go. So it's a horse racing owner that he doesn't race thoroughbreds. What's the other type of?
That's the trotters or the
they're called trotters.
Right, the pacer, right. So, but when I go to the races, I don't do it often, but when I do, that's more of a recreational thing. So I would put myself in the typical recreational bettor on a Saturday college football slate where you're just going to want to bet the games that you're watching, and I do that when I go to the track, right? Now, if you take someone who does it professionally, you think they bet all 9, 10, 11 races that day? No, they might bet one because they've got it. They feel they've got an edge in that one race, but I'm going there recreationally. It's fun. I'm going to play every single race. I'm going to sit there. I'm going to handicap it. I'm a genius. I'm going to tell you why I was a genius when that race wins. And then I'm going to tell you why the jockey screwed up on the race that I lose. It's just what we do.
It's pure entertainment.
But it's entertainment. But I'm going to play every single game. Now, if you want to do this, or I'm going to play every race, if you want to actually do this and do it correctly, then you don't play every single game. You don't play every game. You don't play every Monday night game because it's the Monday night game. You don't play every Sunday night game because it's on TV. You don't play the big national college football game because it's the big national college football game. Like sometimes those games are just not worth playing. And I always know this is going to happen to me when I have a bunch of games. I'll always have friends contact me if I don't have the Monday night game and say, who do you like on Monday night? If I don't have it, if I don't have any edge in my model, my guess is as good as yours. I become just the average person when it comes down to that. Now I have opinions. I had an opinion on this. I didn't have the Sunday night game that just passed was San Francisco and Green Bay. Now I had an opinion. I liked San Francisco in that game, but that was just my own personal opinion. I'm going to be 50-50 probably on those personal opinions, but where I make my money is on the models. So again, don't overbet. Don't feel like you're obligated to bet every single game. I understand
Don't chase
that's
it.
what you want to do. Don't chase the losers, and try to get yourself mentally. We're talking about psychology here. Mentally, you have to be able to put yourself in a position where the losses just don't destroy you and the wins don't get you too high. I used to go to work days after on a Monday after going 8-1 in the NFL, and I used to walk around Manhattan and say, man, I wonder if everyone knows how fucking amazing I was yesterday in the NFL. And of course, no one does, but in my mind, I'm the greatest in the world.
Yeah, you feel like you have the gift of prophecy when you go when you do good like that, and then you feel like you're totally lost when you. I totally know what you're talking about. And you know when you were telling your story before, and we'll close on this. Is that if you haven't seen this episode of The Sopranos, it's in season 6. It's called Chasing It. It's when Tony just keeps losing, and he starts taking Carmela's money, and he's like, "You got to put it on the Jets." And Carmela's like, "No, I'm not doing that." And the Jets win, and he didn't bet, and he gets mad. He won. But he got mad that he didn't bet more. That's the mentality you start getting in. So you're a big Sopranos fan, right?
I am. Yeah, I did.
Yeah. So do you remember that episode called Chasing It?
I do.
Highly recommend this. If you like this podcast, go watch that episode again. Even if you've seen The Sopranos, it's called Chasing It. It's season 6. All right, John Alesia, aka Statsational, you did it again. You brought the people into your mindset of, and this is a topic that's we've all gone through. I think that everyone has had cold streaks, losing streaks, where and it starts to affect your psyche. But I guess if you want, this is a great podcast to re-listen to. If you miss something. We'll be back again, maybe this week, maybe next week, with another episode of Beat the Bookie. For at Statsational, I am at Alan Seslowski, aka Season Long Says, and we'll see you next time on Beat the Bookie.